Welcome everybody, this is the Prepper Dog series, episode 12, Raw Food Myths Debunked. In this conversation we're going to talk about the top 5 raw food myths that I commonly hear that really irk me, and they're commonly perpetuated in the raw feeding community, and I just want to go ahead and put them to rest today. So I'm going to be going over 5 different myths that are commonly perpetuated. Let's get into the science. Myth number 1. A raw food diet, whether that be BARF, whole prey, Franken prey, Franken BARF, hybrid, keto, insert random raw food diet here, is the closest thing to an ancestral diet, a wolf's diet, a dog can get. This is false. If you wanted to feed something that was the closest thing to a wolf's diet or an ancestral diet, then feed them that diet. It's not hard to go out, grab a whole animal, live or dispatched, and give it directly to your dog. Feathers, fur, scales, and all. But nobody's advocating for that. Nobody's saying do that because common sense would tell you that would be more detrimental to your dog than it would benefit your dog. There's a reason why you're not seeing in these forums. There's a reason why you're not seeing anyone on YouTube saying, yeah, grab a whole turkey, kill it, give it to your dog. Feathers, intestines, and all. Just do it. And that's because, like I said, it would do more damage than good. So this idea that the closest thing you can get to an ancestral wolf diet is going to your grocery store, picking up some chicken breasts or chicken thighs with some chicken liver, chicken feet, and neck, and feeding that to your dog that was given to you by big animal agriculture is somehow the closest thing that you can get to an ancestral diet. Is just complete nonsense. Like I said, guys, let's use common sense. If you really wanted to feed your dog authentic ancestral diet, you can. It's not hard. Go out, get a live animal, give it to your dog directly, or kill it, give it to your animal, give it to your dog, and that would literally be what would happen in the wild. So let's not conflate the two. Let's just be common sense, and let's be honest with what we're saying. Nobody in the raw food community is advocating for that. And the reason, like I said, it do more damage than good. Let's move on to myth number 2. Myth number 2. Dogs have evolved to consume raw meat diets. Now, on face value, this seems very illogical, but if you look at this in context, this can easily very much be proven a myth if we take the consideration and we take the overall ideology from myth number 1 that we really believe that dogs and wolves can eat the same diet and have similar results, because that would obviously be false. According to evolutionary geneticist Erik Axelsson from Sweden, he and his colleagues came up with a landmark study, and they compared dog and wolf DNA. And very interesting enough, they found that the findings for the genome for dogs and wolves are different, being that dogs are able to digest starch way better, fivefold times better than their wolf counterparts. And that's because dogs have 4 to 30 copies of a gene that is used for digesting amylase, which is what enables them to break down starch in the intestines, while wolves only had 2 copies on each chromosome versus 4 to 30. So if we're looking at this from a scientific standpoint, dogs are evolving and still currently evolving to be able to digest more and more starch. And that should be no surprise given the fact that, dogs are being, evolving to live, side by side with human beings. And as humans, especially if you live in modern day Western culture, we consume a lot of starch per capita. So it should be no surprise that dogs are actually evolving to be able to digest more and more starch and be able to acclimate more and more towards, the human norm, so to speak. So do I believe dogs can consume raw meat? Absolutely. Do I feed a raw diet to my dog? Absolutely. But this idea that there's overwhelming evidence to show that dogs can eat the same as a wolf is just factually not true. Like I said, would you feed, or do you see anybody out there feeding whole live animals or animal carcasses with fur, intestine, claws, the whole 9 yards to their dog. No, you're not seeing that. People will remove the scales, or they will remove the feather. They will make sure there's no fur, so there's a reason for that. Again, it really comes down to just using common sense. But from an evolutionary standpoint, we are seeing that dogs are evolving to be able to digest more and more starch. Myth 3: a mediocre raw diet is better than a high quality commercial kibble. Now, this myth is one of my most favorite to talk about because it really plays off this emotional concept that a lot of people first experience when they're wanting to make this transition to a raw food diet. A lot of times what we see is, and this is regardless to what's going on necessarily health wise with the dog, but you have a lot of people that are feeding a very low quality commercial kibble to begin with, and then once they are woke, so to speak, or they come to this realization that they may not be feeding the best food to their diet for their dog, they go into this phase where they research everything, and a lot of times they run into these blogs where people talk about ancestral diets for dogs. They start talking about corn, wheat, and soy, grains, animal byproducts, and all this stuff, which is a conversation for another time. But they go through this awakening phase, and a lot of times the raw diet is seen as this holy grail of dog nutrition. And a lot of people really, buy into the idea that even if they're feeding a mediocre raw diet, that's somehow better than feeding a high quality commercial kibble. And I'm gonna tell you, I feed raw. I take the food that I feed my dog very seriously because it's the exact same food I eat. Okay, I raise my own animals. I don't depend on big animal agriculture. So this is very, for me, you would think that, I would be one of these very zealous type raw feeders, and I'm not. I am not this purist raw food diet person. And the reason is because I look at things logically and I use common sense when I'm going about, understanding what it is that is important in your diet. And one of the most important things that you need in any diet is you need balance. You need, to have a food that's not going to have deficiencies, because that's going to be the biggest thing that's going to hurt you in the short term and in the long term. So when we're looking at commercial dog food, it's important to realize that by the FDA and the USDA, commercial dog food companies are required to meet standards that are set forth by the AFCO, the Association of American Feed Control Officials, which they derive their nutritional requirements that are set forth by the NRC, the National Research Council. So in order for a commercial dog food to be able to be sold, at least here in the United States, there is a long process. Now we can talk about, the overall, how confident one feels in that process. We can talk about all the problems with the process. We can talk about, conspiracies as regards to where funding gets paid for, and we can go down the rabbit hole. But at the end of the day, nobody can say that there isn't science that's set up, and nobody at the end of the day is really gonna, I haven't seen anybody that's gonna say that the NRC is completely ridiculous and there's no merit to the science that has gone in and continues to go in to set forth, minimum nutritional requirements for your dog. So with that being said, yes, there are some crap commercial dog foods out there that I would never feed my dog. You're never going to see me feed my dog Nutro, Science Diet, Eukanuba, Pedigree, Purina. You're never going to see me feed my dog that. But there are high quality, commercial kibbles out there that I don't have a problem feeding my dog if I needed to, and that's because I've read the ingredients, I know where the food comes from, I've done the research, and I feel confident because I can see the nutritional layout in front of me. I can actually see what my dog's minimum requirements are and what the food can provide, and that's what you should be doing with any food, whether that be a commercial kibble food or a raw food diet. So this idea that by feeding your dog a mediocre raw diet, when I mean mediocre, I mean, you're, like I said, going to the grocery store, you're getting the animal products that are on sale, and you're just you're going, and we'll talk about this more as we go, but you're just trying to get the minimum requirements that you need, whether that be 80-10-10, prey diet, what have you, and you're just trying to get something together. I truly believe that there are high quality commercial kibble out there that is going to be better for your dog, short term and long term, than feeding, excuse my French, a half-assed raw diet. Because at the end of the day, if you're feeding a dog any diet, I don't care what it is, any diet that's deficient in micro, macronutrients, for example, you're doing more damage than you are doing good. So at the end of the day, I am not this zealot, purist, raw food person. I believe feeding a balanced raw food diet is the healthiest way to feed your dog. But looking at the science, looking at nutritional breakdowns of how your dog should be fed, if you are going to half-ass a raw food diet, you're just better off eating kibble, in my honest opinion. Myth number 4, as long as you feed an 80-10-10, meaning 80% meat, 10% organ meat, and 10% bone, your dog will have everything they need. The real question here, is it complete and balanced? So if we're looking at this just using science, common sense, and reasoning, the answer is false. No, you're definitely not. And there's a couple ways to look at this. If you are feeding, for example, nothing but beef, right? Let's say you're feeding cow, and you're feeding 80% muscle meat and then 10% organ meat and 10% bones, all from a cow. Your dog's not going to have everything that they need. I'm just gonna lay that out there right now. It's not going to happen. If you're feeding really, truly any one animal protein source, I just don't see you meeting all these requirements. I really don't. What a lot of people do is they'll go out to the grocery store and they'll buy, for example, ground beef, lean ground beef, because it's usually you can get a good sell on that. So they'll put 80% lean ground beef, and then they'll get the 10% organ meat and 10% bone requirement from chicken. You can get those containers of chicken liver pretty inexpensively, and then you can get chicken necks and chicken feet also very inexpensively. And so they're trying to get the most bang for their buck. I can understand that. I can be sympathetic to that, but they're just looking at this purely from a formula standpoint, not what they're actually feeding. And so if you do 80% muscle meat from cow, and then the other 20% you're getting from poultry products, chicken products, you're going to have a vastly different nutrient breakdown than you would if you just got it all from one animal. And then there's a huge difference between doing that and, say, something that I would be more apt to do, which would be feeding a whole rabbit with duck eggs. And the reason being is because if we look at animals per capita, most animals are 25% organ meat by weight. So that wouldn't even be close to mimicking the 80-10-10, because the ratios of the actual prey animal that I'm feeding is a fourth organ meat. You know what I mean? So these are all things that you need to think about and feed intentionally, and that's what I'm really trying to get here. You want to make sure that all your animal sources, when you're feeding them, you're doing so intentionally. It's important that you are intentionally feeding your dog, understanding what the micro, macro breakdowns are going to be. So this 80-10-10, could you get that into the right percentages and ratio, the right nutrient requirements using this ratio? I'm sure you could. I'm sure if you're using certain animal products that you have intentionally done, then yes, you can probably meet it with the 80-10-10. I don't think so. I haven't seen it yet, and if you have seen it, please tell me what those ratios and breakdowns are, because I haven't seen it. I've done the math, I've done the calculations, and I haven't seen any ratio where this has worked, like I said before. So I think it's important to look at. I think it's important to understand. But yes, if you're out there and you can show me, I feed 80% muscle meat from this animal, 10% organ meat from this animal, and 10% bones from this animal, and it will give me everything that will hit the minimum requirements set forth by the NRC. Please let me know. I'd be very interested in looking at that science, looking at that breakdown. I just haven't seen it. maybe if you took that 80% meat and you broke that down into, I feed, 20% this, animal muscle meat, 20% that animal muscle meat, and then 40% this animal muscle meat, and then I break the organs and bones up this way, maybe. But like I said, I haven't seen that. I haven't seen that in any literature, and I definitely haven't seen an actual breakdown of that. So if it exists, please let me know. I'm interested in seeing it, but overall, I have not seen any science that would show me that the 80-10-10 actually works. And like I said before, given the way I feed raw, and you guys can look at my videos where I actually do the micro-macro breakdown of the foods and meals that I feed, you'll notice that, like I said, looking at the science, most prey animals are about 25% organ meat, and I will feed a whole rabbit to my dog because I raised them on my homestead, so they have about 25% organ meat, and will include duck eggs and things like that. So it's important. Look at it, whether you're feeding your dog a commercial dog food kibble or you're feeding them a raw dog food diet. Please, please, please be intentional. Look at the nutrient breakdown, understand the nutrient density of what you're feeding, and ensure that you actually know what's going into your animal's diet, your dog's diet, and you're able to say with certainty, what the nutritional breakdowns are and what the requirements are for your dog. Let's move on to our last myth. Myth number 5, variety in the diet is the key to raw feeding success. So I would consider this categorically to be false. If you're just feeding a variety of food sources just for the sake of feeding variety because you think that somehow by adding enough variety you'll meet the minimum requirements as per the NRC, yeah, that's why I would say this is categorically false. Now, do I feed a variety of food sources to my dog? Absolutely, and we'll get into why I do that in a second. But at the end of the day, feeding a variety of food sources can be a good thing in the sense that they have certain properties that make them unique. For example, fish naturally has a lot of DHA. Rabbit meat has more protein, for example, than beef. It has lots of vitamin B, vitamin C, potassium, iron, phosphorus, trace minerals, selenium, etc. So these are all good reasons to feed that food source. But if you're just feeding that food source just to add variety for variety's sake, thinking that it's somehow going to, just because you add enough stuff that will somehow give you a complete or balanced diet, I think that's wishful thinking at best. So I've said it 1,000 times, and I'll say it 1,000 more times. If you're feeding any food, you should be doing it intentionally, utilizing good science and good judgment. So for me, I feed a variety based upon what's available seasonally, what I'm most likely to have on hand. And I do that because I feed raw. The reason why I feed a raw food diet to my dog is for sustainability and preparedness reasons. Kibble may not always be there. That's a pill that some people have to swallow, And so I'm under the understanding that, there may be a time where I can't depend on to go to the grocery store to get the food I need to feed myself and my family, my dog included. So for me, I feed a variety based upon what's available seasonally, what's available in my local area, and what I have on hand. Because I don't want the first time my dog to eat a certain food to be based upon necessity due to food scarcity. Let me give you an example. I don't want the first time my dog to eat a black striper to be because that's all that's available in my area, and I have to fish for it. And so during a season, when it's in season, that's what the bulk of what my dog's diet is going to be dependent upon, right? I don't want the first time she has that to be, well, I'm sorry, dog, this is the only thing I have. I want my dog's gut microbiome to have had that protein source before in the past and know what to do with it. Same thing with deer, same thing with elk, same thing with rabbit, duck, quail, pig, cow, chicken, you name it. So these are all, like I said, these are all food sources that are local in my area, and I don't want the first time for her to have it to be based upon this is all that's available. So I think it's really important to build your dog's gut microbiome. I think it's very important to feed for sustainability and preparedness reasons, and that is why I do that. But I don't feed a variety of dog food because I'm under this ill-advised ideology or assumption that as long as I add enough stuff, it'll somehow make my dog's diet balanced. That is not a good reason to feed a variety. And you don't need to feed a large variety of foods in order for your dog to get everything they need. I think two great food sources that really do well complementing each other are rabbits and ducks. Like I said, rabbits have a lot of protein. They're very rich nutrient density wise when it comes to micro, macro, and phytonutrients. But they do have some limitations. Fat would be a limitation. But for example, duck eggs has a great omega-3, omega-6 ratio. It has a lot of good beneficial fats in it. And so I think that what the duck lacks, the rabbit makes up in, and what the rabbit lacks, the duck makes up in. So I think those two animal sources are very high quality, and they are really good at complementing each other. So, like I said, at the end of the day, you guys should be feeding, and you should be feeding intentionally, and you should be feeding based upon the science and based upon good judgment. So that's all I have for you guys today. Those are my 5 myths debunked. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section below. If you think that I got this totally wrong, let's have a conversation. The only way we can be better is to challenge ourselves and to challenge each other. So I am not the end-all be-all. I'm totally open to having my mind changed, and I'm totally open to looking at the science. So if you disagree with this assessment, please let me know what I got wrong and why. And I'm always trying to make myself better. So like I said, hope you guys like the conversation. Leave me any questions you have in the comment section below, or like I said before, if you think I got it totally wrong, please let me know how and why. And as always, guys, and as always, long live the Republic.